The boy at the gate was not a boy at all. She was a girl of maybe 9, wrapped in a coat 3 sizes too big, and she was counting the stars out loud on Silas Brennan's porch as though the counting itself were the only thing keeping her upright. 182. 183. Silas heard her before he saw her. He had come out to check the mare, because the mare had been restless, and the mare was never wrong about weather or wolves or strangers. He stopped at the corner of the barn with the lantern low against his hip and listened to a small voice counting past 200, steady as a clock, and something in his chest that had been frozen for 11 years cracked without permission. He walked toward the porch slowly, boots quiet on the packed dirt, and when he stepped into the yellow ring of his own lamp, she did not flinch. She did not stop counting. She only turned her face up, and her eyes were the color of river ice, and she said, 217, and then, politely, I'm sorry. I didn't know whose house it was. How long you been sitting there? Since the sky went dark enough to see them. He looked at her feet. She had no shoes. The porch boards under her heels were pale with the cold coming up out of them. It was late October in the high country of Wyoming, and the frost was already crawling down from the ridge. Where'd you come from? She thought about that a long time. Then she said, the wagon at the bottom of the hill. But the man driving it is dead now, so I don't think he counts. Silas Brennan had lived alone on this stretch of land since the fever of 1885 had taken his wife Ruth and their unborn son inside of a single week, and in 11 years he had spoken maybe 400 sentences aloud, most of them to the mare. He was 41 years old. His hair was going the color of iron at the temples. He had a reputation in the town of Ashfall for being polite, prompt with his debts, and impossible to know. He set the lantern down on the porch rail. He said, You hungry? She nodded once. Come inside. She followed him without a word, and he noticed, as she passed under his arm at the door, that she was clutching something under the too big coat, a tin cup, dented, with a length of string tied through the handle. She held it the way another child might hold a doll. Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight. Pour yourself something warm and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We love knowing who is with us by the fire. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and cold coffee and the good clean smoke of a stove that had been fed properly for a long time. He set a bowl of the evening stew in front of her, and she ate the way small animals eat. Quick, quiet, eyes on the door. He poured milk in her tin cup because she would not put it down and would not accept another vessel. Her name, she said between spoonfuls, was Wren Callaway. She was 9.5. Her mother had died 2 winters back of a cough that would not leave, and her father had put her on a wagon 3 days ago with a man named Hollis who was supposed to take her to an aunt in Cheyenne. Hollis had drunk himself off the seat that afternoon, and the horses had bolted, and the wagon had ended in the creek at the foot of Silas's hill. Hollis had not gotten up again. Wren had walked until she saw a light. Ain't got a name? Silas asked. Aunt Bess. But my father said she didn't really want me. He said she'd take me because it was the Christian thing. But he said the Christian thing and the kind thing weren't always the same, and I should remember that. Your father sounds like he knew a few things. He drank, she said matter of fact. But he knew a few things too. Both can be true. Silas did not know what to say to that, so he did what he always did when he did not know what to say. He got up and put more wood in the stove. She slept that night on the settle by the fire, wrapped in Ruth's old quilt, which he had not taken out of the cedar chest in 11 years, and which smelled faintly of lavender and of something he did not have a name for anymore. He stood in the doorway of his own bedroom a long time watching her sleep. Her breath came in small, even clouds. The tin cup sat on the floor beside her, where she could reach it. He did not sleep himself. He sat at the kitchen table until the lamp burned down, thinking about the town, and about the sheriff, and about the aunt in Cheyenne who had said the Christian thing was not the kind thing. He thought about the wagon in the creek and the dead man in it. He thought about what a man was supposed to do. At first light, he saddled the mare and rode down to the creek and found it exactly as she had described. Hollis had a broken neck and a bottle still in his coat and papers in an oilcloth pouch that named the aunt and named the father and named a sum of money the aunt had already been sent for the girl's keeping. $60. A full year's wage for some men. Silas read the paper twice and then folded it and put it in his own pocket, and he did not, in that moment, know exactly why. He rode into Ashfall that afternoon and told Sheriff Doyle about the wagon and the body, and Doyle sent 2 men out with a buckboard to fetch Hollis home, and Doyle asked, almost as an afterthought, whether there had been anyone else in the wagon. Silas looked at the sheriff a long moment. Doyle was a decent man, tired, 60 years old, with a wife who was ill and a deputy who was not. There was a girl, Silas said. She walked out. She's at my place. She's got an aunt in Cheyenne, but the aunt's been paid and doesn't want her. Doyle rubbed his jaw. That's the aunt's problem, not yours. Might be mine now. Silas. Doyle leaned forward. You've been alone a long time. A child is not a cure for that. I didn't say she was. August Rourke will hear about this by nightfall. You know he will. Silas knew. August Rourke owned the bar, which was every piece of grass from the ridge to the river, except for the 240 acres of good bottomland that Silas Brennan had refused to sell him for 11 years. Rourke was 58, silver-haired, well-spoken, and had buried 3 business rivals in ways the law could not quite touch. He wanted Silas's land the way a man wants the one tooth still aching in an otherwise clean mouth. Let him hear, Silas said. He rode home in the blue hour before dusk. Wren was sitting on the porch again, in a pair of Ruth's old wool socks that he had left folded on the settle, and she was counting the stars as they came out one by one. 7, she said, when he swung down. 8, that one just there. He tied the mare. He sat down on the porch step beside her. He did not speak for a long time. Finally, he said, would you want to stay here a while? She considered this the way she considered everything, as though it were a math problem someone had handed her. How long is a while? As long as it needs to be. She nodded once. Then she went back to counting. Word travels in a small town the way fire travels in dry grass. By the end of the week, half of Ashfall knew that Silas Brennan the widower had a child living in his house, and the other half was on its way to knowing. The Methodist minister came out on a Tuesday to be sure the arrangement was decent. Silas gave him coffee, showed him the settle where Wren slept, showed him the second room he had begun to clear out for her, and answered every question in his 400-cents-a-year voice, and the minister rode off satisfied. The schoolteacher, Miss Ardithvale, came out on a Thursday to see if the child would be attending school. She was 36, unmarried, and had the kind of steady eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Wren, who was standing in the doorway holding the tin cup, and she said, Child, do you know your letters? Yes, ma'am. My mother taught me. I know figures, too. I can count higher than most anybody. How high have you counted? 3001, Wren said. That was the night my mother died. I stopped there because the sun came up. Ardithvale did not say anything for a moment. Then she looked at Silas, and Silas looked at her, and something quiet passed between them that neither of them named. She said, I'd be honored to have her in my classroom, Mr. Brennan. I'll bring her Monday. Bring yourself too, if you like. Parents are welcome the first day. He said he would think on it, which for Silas was the same as saying yes. August Rourke rode out to the Brennan place on Friday. He came alone, which was itself a message, because Rourke did not go anywhere alone unless he wanted a conversation to be deniable. He sat his big blood bay in the yard and did not dismount. Heard you took in a stray, Rourke said pleasantly. Heard you were coming to say so. She's not yours, Silas. She's not yours either. Rourke smiled. It was the smile of a man who had never lost anything he had decided to want. Aunt in Cheyenne has the paper. The paper's been paid. The paper says the girl belongs to that household. Aunt in Cheyenne doesn't want her. Doesn't matter what she wants. The law of it matters. Then let the law say so. Rourke's smile did not change. I could make it easy. I could send a man to fetch the girl to Cheyenne myself. As a favor to a neighbor. Save you the trip. Save you the trouble of a hearing in a courtroom where a man living alone with a girl who isn't his blood might not come out looking the way he wants to look. Silas felt the cold of it settle in behind his ribs. It was not a threat about the girl. It was a threat about him. About what a good storyteller could make a jury believe in a country where the nearest judge was 140 miles away and rode Rourke's horses. You want my land, Silas said quietly. I want you to be reasonable. Get off my yard, August. Rourke tipped his hat. Think on it, Silas. A man alone can afford principles. A man with a child cannot. He rode out. The dust settled slow. Silas stood in his own yard and understood, with the clean clarity that comes to a man once or twice in a life, that Rourke had just told him exactly how this was going to go and had given him the shape of the storm before it arrived. He went inside. Wren was at the table drawing figures on a slate Ardith Vale had left. She looked up. Is he a bad man? Yes. Is he going to try to take me? Silas sat down across from her. He put both his hands flat on the table. He's going to try. She thought about this. Then she said, my father said sometimes the kind thing looks like the hard thing from the outside. He said you have to be willing to look wrong for a while to do right. Silas looked at this small, serious child and felt his throat close. Your father knew a lot of things, he said. He drank, she reminded him gently. But he knew a few things too. If you were sitting on that porch, if you had lost what Silas had lost, and a child had appeared out of the dark counting your stars, what would you have done? Would you have opened the door? Would you have called the sheriff and let the world take her where the world was already taking her? Would you have picked the fight you knew was coming, knowing what it might cost you? Sit with that a moment. Then let me tell you what he did. Rourke's man came on a Sunday, when he thought Silas would be at church. His name was Cade Merrow. He was 30, quick, and had killed a man in Laramie in a way the town had chosen to forget. He came up the wagon road at a walk, with an empty seat beside him and a set of papers in his coat, and he found Silas Brennan sitting on the porch steps with a Winchester across his knees and a cup of coffee on the rail beside him. Morning, Merrow said. Morning. I've come for the child. You have not. Merrow smiled a small, tight smile. Mr. Rourke sent papers, signed by a judge in Cheyenne. Show me. Merrow held them out at arm's length. Silas did not stand. He said, walk them up here. Put them on the step. Then step back. Merrow did. The papers were what Merrow said they were. They were also, Silas noted, 3 days too new. The date of the aunt's petition was the day after Rourke had ridden out of his yard. Wren, Silas said, not loud. Come out here, please. She came. She had the tin cup in one hand and the slate in the other. She stood in the doorway. This man says your Aunt Bess wants you now. Does that sound like the truth to you? Wren looked at Merrow. Merrow, to his credit, did not look away. My Aunt Bess, Wren said, hasn't written a letter in her life. She can't read. My father said so. Whoever wrote that paper wasn't her. Merrow's jaw worked. Silas stood up. He kept the Winchester in the crook of his arm. You can tell Mr. Rourke, Silas said, that the paper's a forgery, and I'll be in Cheyenne on Wednesday, saying so in front of the actual judge whose name is on it, which I suspect is not the judge who signed it. You can also tell him that if he sends another man to my house, he'll be sending him to a place where a man is standing on his own porch with his own rifle protecting his own child. Do you understand me? His own child, Merrow said softly. His own child. Something in Merrow shifted. He was a killer, but he was not a stupid killer, and he could hear when a line had been drawn that would cost more to cross than to walk around. He touched his hat. He rode out. Silas sat down. His hands were shaking. Wren came and sat beside him on the step, and after a moment, she put her small cold hand on top of his and said nothing at all. He went to Cheyenne on Wednesday. He took Wren with him because he would not leave her, and he took Ardith Vale because she had insisted, and he took the sheriff's deputy Owen Riggs, who had turned out to be a better man than his reputation. In the courthouse in Cheyenne, he showed the judge, the real judge, whose name was Halloran and who was 72 and had known Silas's father, the forged papers. He showed him the aunt's mark on the original document, which was a shaky X, and he showed him the aunt's alleged signature on the new one, which was a flowing hand no illiterate woman had ever written. He put Wren in front of the judge, and the judge, who had raised 4 girls of his own, asked her 3 questions and listened to her answers and did not need a 4th. Halloran signed the order at 11 in the morning. Wren Callaway was to be the ward of Silas Brennan of Ashfall, Wyoming, until such time as she reached her majority or chose otherwise. The forged papers were to be sent to the Cheyenne prosecutor with a letter from the judge himself. August Rourke was named in that letter, by name, as the party under whose direction the forgery had been made. They rode home the long way. Through country the aspens had turned gold. Wren fell asleep against Ardith Vale's shoulder in the wagon. Ardith looked across the sleeping child at Silas, and Silas looked back, and neither of them looked away for a long moment. You didn't have to come, he said finally. I know. Why did you? She thought about it. She was a woman who thought about her answers. Because I've spent 36 years being told my worth was in what I hadn't done yet, hadn't married, hadn't given anyone children, hadn't been chosen. And that little girl on your porch has been told the same thing in a shorter time. I wasn't going to let her be told it once more. Silas nodded. He watched the road. After a while he said, Ruth would have liked you. I know, said Ardith Vale, who had lived in Ashfall for 12 years and had known Ruth Brennan for 6 of them. She told me so once. Before. Silas looked at her then. Really looked. And Ardith Vale, 36 years old, unmarried, steady-eyed, with a chalk stain on the cuff of her good gray dress, looked steadily back. Strange, she said quietly. How the things you've stopped hoping for tend to find you when you're busy hoping for something else. He did not answer. There was nothing to add to that. They came home in the last of the light. Wren woke as the wagon rolled into the yard, and she said, "Sleep soft. Are we back?" And Silas said, "We're home." And the word came out of his mouth easier than he expected it to. That night, after Wren had eaten and been put to bed in the room he had finished for her, with the quilt from the cedar chest folded at the foot, Silas walked Ardith Vale out to her buggy. The stars were coming up thick over the ridge. He stood beside the wheel and did not know what to say, and then he said, without planning to, "Would you come to supper Sunday? Wren would like it." "So would I." "I'll bring pie," said Ardith Vale. "If this story is finding you tonight the way it needs to, if it is settling into some place in you that has been waiting for it, a like and a subscribe tells us to keep telling them. There are more people out there listening in the dark. Help us find them." August Rourke did not go quietly. Men like Rourke never do. He had a lawyer in Cheyenne and a lawyer in Denver and money enough to make a small problem into a long one. But Judge Halloran's letter had gone to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor was a young man named Ellis Wren, no relation, a coincidence Silas would think about for the rest of his life, who had been waiting 3 years for a reason to look into the bar. The reason had arrived. Ellis Wren looked. He found the forged signature. He found the clerk in Cheyenne who had been paid to notarize it. He found the clerk's ledger, which was a careful clerk's ledger, and in it he found 7 other names, 7 other transactions, 7 other pieces of land that had moved to August Rourke's holdings through paper that would not survive daylight. The trial was in the spring. It lasted 11 days. Silas testified. Wren testified, in a clear voice that never once wavered, about a man on a blood bay who had come to their yard and threatened her guardian. Ardith Vale testified about the day the papers had first appeared. Sheriff Doyle testified about 11 years of small, careful cruelties he had never quite been able to prove. Cade Merrow, who had been arrested in Laramie for an old killing that suddenly a witness had remembered, testified in exchange for his life. August Rourke was convicted on 7 counts of fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy, and 1 count of subornation of a federal officer. His land was seized to satisfy the judgments of the 7 families he had swindled. His cattle were sold at auction. His house was sold to a rancher out of Montana who tore down the front gate and put up a plain wooden one. Rourke himself went to the territorial prison in Laramie, where he died for years later of a fever he refused, out of pride, to let a doctor treat. Of the 7 families whose land was returned, 3 chose to come back and work it. The other 4 sold to Silas Brennan at a fair price, because Silas had testified for them, and because Wren had told the story of the tin cup in the courtroom, and because Ashfall had, over the course of that spring, quietly decided that the Brennan place was the moral center of the valley. Silas did not become rich. He became solvent. He hired 2 of the returning families as partners rather than hands. He gave Owen Riggs, the deputy who had ridden with him to Cheyenne, 20 acres of good pasture as a wedding gift when Riggs married the storekeeper's daughter that fall. He did not touch Rourke's old house on the ridge. He let the wind take it. Ardith Vale married Silas Brennan in the Methodist Church in Ashfall on a Saturday in September, with Wren Callaway standing between them holding the ring on a length of blue ribbon. Wren was 10 by then and had grown 2 inches over the summer, and she still carried the tin cup, though now she carried it in a pocket sewn into her Sunday dress for that purpose. Ardith had made the pocket herself. 5 years later, on a warm night in July, a man riding through Ashfall stopped at the Brennan place to water his horse, and he saw a girl of 15 sitting on the porch steps with a woman of 41 and a man of 47, and the 3 of them were counting the stars aloud together, taking turns, laughing when one of them lost the count. There was a small boy asleep in the woman's lap. His name was Thomas, and he was 3, and he had his father's quiet eyes and his mother's steady hands. The tin cup, dented and older now, sat on the porch rail with a sprig of prairie sage in it. The traveler asked, from politeness, how many stars they had counted. Wren Callaway Brennan looked up at him and smiled. We stopped counting the number a long time ago, she said. Now we just count the ones we love, and we count them twice, in case one of them is watching. The traveler tipped his hat and rode on into the dark, and behind him the porch light stayed on a long time, warm and unhurried. The way a light stays on in a house where no one has been forgotten and no one is ever asked to leave. Next, we'll tell the story of a war widow who inherited a failing ranch and a 15-year-old debt to a man everyone said was already dead, until the morning he rode back into her yard on a horse she recognized, carrying a letter in her husband's handwriting. Stay close. We'll see you by the fire.